Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Curriculum Subcommittee of the Brookline Schools. It's November 28th, 2023. These are for the thank you. The agendas are here. And it's hybrid, so we have some virtuals and some people in person. We will
Suzanne, there's no video from your end.
Okay.
You wanna?
We're gonna work on it.
Sorry about that.
Here we go.
That's why you look the way you do.
Yeah, there is. Thank you.
Just to let you know, you're missing the cookies if you're not in person.
Why do you gotta tell me that?
Very good cookies.
Just saying. We'll start with the approval of the October 24th meeting minutes. I'll move that. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Stephen. Helen?
Sure.
Natalie?
Yeah.
Yes. Stephen?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Are we going to move into class sizes?
Yeah, we're going to switch it if we can. Yes.
Okay. So we're going to switch the discussion of Brookline High School class sizes. We're going to do that after we have the discussion of the district strategic plan.
That's because Anthony and Hal are finishing up the faculty meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say they're not here. So that's a good idea.
Yes. So we thought we'd start with the strategic plan, which I'm really excited. We are going to have another presentation of this Thursday night, but this group is my favorite group to run things by first because you always give me such good advice. I want to thank Sarah for teaching me two things. One, that Padlets print out very, very concisely and are an amazing teaching tool. And your comments are really good. So I'm going to go through your questions as I go through the plan as well. So anybody ask anything as we do this and we'll be in good shape.
One quick question.
Mhm.
So are there changes that you've made to it that we should know about?
Not to the core values and the vision, but there have been changes to the goals.
Okay, great.
Nothing substantive. It's more, we broke them out.
So we don't have to do that part.
Nope, we don't have to do the core values. You can switch, skip right to goal one.
Okay.
And I want to thank Neil Gupta, our communication specialist, for doing this.
Something on there.
Yes, there's a placeholder, there's two placeholder sites, one for the superintendent's message and one for the process.
Explains the process we went through last.
Yes. So goal one remains our big focus on teaching and learning and is talking about student achievement and having a cohesive, culturally relevant, consistent, standards-based curriculum in ELA, math, science, social studies, and world language delivered using evidence-based, culturally responsive instruction. So that's our big goal over the course of the next 3 years. And then if we go to the next.
Sorry, Jody, do you want me to share my screen? I'm following along on the deck that you sent around earlier. Would it help if I shared for anyone following along?
In public, yes, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Moseying along.
And I'm just going.
Keep going, keep going.
So here you see the first substantive change from when the school committee saw it last time. What I heard loud and clear was that the school committee would like to see this plan broken out in years, what was going to happen in each year. So because we're getting a later start than we had anticipated when we were going through, because the process took a little bit longer. This year, school year 24, we're calling our foundational year. 25 would be year 1, 26 would be year 2, and 27 would end up being year 3. What we've done is we've taken this goal and we've broken it down into what will happen in each year. And this is the first of the checks and balances in the system. So many of these are, did the district do this? Yes or no? Did we accomplish this? This is the work that we're doing. A lot of this hasn't changed from the original initiatives. They're just more called out right now. So,
But is it fair to say, Jody, that it's a living document?
mhm,
I mean, I think maybe we want to point that out at some point, that, you know, if you don't make something in foundational year, we're gonna
yes,
either throw it into year one or make some adjustments or.
exactly.
Right.
So this was, and we have to remember that these initiatives and these ideas were the best thinking of a group of people. They may not be exactly right? They may not be the right levers to pull, and we'll know that because if we go to the next slide, this is where we're starting to look at the impact on student achievement. So this was another piece of feedback from the committee when we first presented this, was how are we going to measure the success of our plan? And one of the things that you'll notice that we're doing in this plan, and this is one of the questions, I'm not sure if it was this goal that Sarah had, is why are we using the subgroups that we're using? And the reason we're using, instead of saying, how are our Middle Eastern students doing? How are our Israeli students doing? We're using the data categories that are captured by the state. We're also focusing very much on our lowest performing students. So reviewing the data. And as we've shared in the subcommittee, we know that our Black and African-American students are not doing as well as our other students, even when you disaggregate the data for income. So what's the one measure that we have now? It may not be a perfect measure, but the one measure that we have at this point is our MCAS data that we can disaggregate and see how our students are doing. So we worked with Erin, who came back and did a telephone consult with Michelle for what would be an ambitious.
Very cool.
Erin
Oh,
Cooley,
oh.
yeah.
I was thinking, what Aaron are we talking about?
Because we wanted an ambitious yet realistic goal for our students. I think I had originally had this at something like 10 percentage points. And Erin, instead of the 3 that it really is, you can tell I'm not a statistician. So what we're looking for is that the percentage of our Black African-American students who meet or exceed expectations in ELA and math will increase by 3. That's actually at the more ambitious. And we, yeah.
So this is teaching learning year 1. This is not foundational year. This is
No. Year
Oh, this
one.
is not,
Yeah, not this year.
next.
so what is this year?
This year, we don't have measurable goals. It's more, did they do it? Did they set us up for success?
Can I give us one?
Yeah, would you like to give us one?
Yeah, attendance.
Oh, yeah, we can, I think we might
That's
have
something that
attendance
might be simple,
later on.
but to start it now, because that will feed into this and help us,
It will, absolutely.
you know, to do it this year. And to
So these are our goals, and what we keep doing is we keep building on these for the subsequent years. So we want an increase by 3 at the end of year 1. So once we're up by 3, we want to increase by 3
Another
again, another 3.
I wondered about that.
Yes, and we want our students to achieve a minimum growth percentile of 50. Then we want them to maintain, then we want them to exceed.
Okay, so we got 50, 50, and then what do we have?
53.
53.
there's something, so what is MTSS? I'm sorry.
Multi-tiered systems of support.
All right, okay.
Oh, sorry, I forgot I was sharing.
So these 50 is right in the middle for the
So
state.
between 40 and 60 is considered typical growth.
Right.
50 is right in the middle.
Right.
We're below that right now.
For
Yes,
this group.
for this subgroup.
We're
of
below
students.
40.
We're hovering right around 40. It depends on the age that you're looking at. Sometimes we dip down as low as
Look at
38.
the cohort from one year to the next. They are not making the typical gain you would expect or the growth.
Correct.
Sorry. Betsy, would you mind sharing your screen instead? I want to be able to flip through some other resources without distracting anyone.
Yeah, that would be kind of weird. Question,
I don't have this.
is there a reason we're not including Hispanic students here too? Because I think they were in similar sorts of
Yeah.
numbers.
There isn't a reason. We could definitely do that. I'll share with you.
Yeah, I mean, that probably is a good idea also from a statistical perspective. If you have a small number of Black students, you might year on year, for like the random variation of
Exactly.
performance. So,
And we do have. a
yeah, I
small
know.
number, Especially in each grade level.
Exactly. So you might actually, these goals might be missed by.
You
just
know what,
having
we may
super
do-
talented tools.
African-American, Hispanic, and low income. But they may include the same, and I don't know how to.
Yeah, the
figure that
low
out.
income isn't as much of a determinant
Driver,
as we
yeah.
think it is.
Really?
It's really race.
Well, okay.
Again, I wonder what that number is. That's low income. That's not student of color.
I could probably get that.
We have that.
Some,
Well, I know we have some, yeah.
yeah, I mean, can you just explain this year on year? Is it at the end, is it based on your last year's scores, how well you should have done this year at the end? Like, do they compare the
Yes.
same child or is it?
Yes, it'll be the
Same
same.
child.
Yes.
Just hard to do the
Are
math.
you referring to the growth scores?
Yeah,
Yeah.
growth scores. I'm
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
confused by growth scores.
Yes. So what the growth scores tell us is compared to a child of a similar learning profile, how is that student's growth? Are they growing and achieving at a typical rate, above a typical rate, or below a typical rate? And we have had some really great success stories. For example, students over at the Driscoll School had a math interventionist last year that you could see in their data, because their growth percentiles were in the 99th and 98th percentile.
Hmm.
You could pick out those students that worked with that interventionist.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
now our task is to find out what
What that
great
person
things
did.
that person really did to get growth scores like that with our students.
So by 3, there's not percentage points, right? When we increase the MCAS score.
Are you looking at growth percentile? No, that is by 3 percentage points.
Okay, so I think we should say that.
It says,
Yeah, we said percentage
We
points.
say it at the beginning, the percentage of students who meet or
Right,
exceed as
correct.
measured by the MCAS
Right.
will increase. Oh, the
number
percentage of
is-
students, not their scores.
Correct.
correct, because the percentage goes up, it means that the scores have gone up. If the percentage of students meeting expectation goes up, their scores had to go up to meet expectation.
So right now, there's like 18% of students in that category, and it'll be 21% of students.
I get it, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't.
Yep.
Welcome.
But I still would put by 3%.
Yeah, yeah, percentage points.
Because it's not clear what 3 is.
Are we gonna make them go through all of it? Well, how do we want to do this,
Take a
Joe?
break.
Do we want to?
Yeah, they know. I warned them that we'd be doing this first.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do.
And it'll help familiarize Hal and Anthony with the strategic plan.
Great, good. We were just in an options-based response training with our staff, so sorry that we're
Options
late, but Jody kindly adjusted.
Options-based.
School safety.
What to do, just in case?
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. Because somebody reading it from outside won't
I
know.
didn't go backwards, but could I just ask, on that foundational year, the first page with these boxes, you have completion 85% of teacher evaluations. Is that 85% of all teachers should be evaluated in that year, or is it 85% of all teachers?
It's 85% of the teachers that should be evaluated in that year. So 85% of the evaluations that should be done will be done.
So we're saying 15% are not going to be evaluated, even though they should be.
Right now, that number is at 46%.
Are you serious?
Yes, unfortunately, I am serious.
District-wide average.
Nice. Okay, so that makes more sense.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's not new.
No, it's been years. That's,
Yeah, well,
Okay,
some work for us then.
yeah, some work to do, which is one of the reasons I wanted to call it out. And one of the things that I'm hoping that this plan does is, especially with some of these data points, is to be transparent about what is, actually happening. So those questions are good because this is our strategic plan for improvement. And how do we want to improve?
I know what you mean here by established working group for 8th to 9th grade transition that is not impacted by bias.
Mhm.
Are you saying the working group shouldn't be impacted or that?
Yes, they shouldn't be either.
Somehow it needs to be a little clear what that means. Maybe that will assess.
Because
the
these
impact
slides
of
will go
bias.
to the public, right?
Yes.
These are, okay, so yeah, being very careful. with
Yeah.
language, I think.
Yeah,
And I've just done an initial proofread, Neil and I, this is hot off the press, that's why you all got it so late. So
So we could,
Yeah.
if we see something that we think. needs
Yes.
yeah.
Something.
yes, absolutely.
Uh,
Sarah did
Can I
earlier
do one
today.
more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why do we need a consultant for vision of graduate work?
Capacity. I think it's the capacity that we have. That's a very large project to
I
take
don't know what
on
it
with the
means
community.
then.
Do you want
I can
to,
speak to
yeah,
it.
speak to that?
Sure,
Yeah,
so-
happy to.
Thanks, Helen. It was one of the pieces, one, we've known we've needed to look at our graduation requirements and pathways. at
Oh,
high
graduate
school
work for
for
students.
some time. So
Yes.
vision of a graduate is.
I- Okay,
You-
that's not a
retract
problem,
the
but this
question.
is not clear.
Not the graduate.
Oh, of graduate work.
I understood this to be
Oh.
teachers' graduate work.
Sorry, so vision of a graduate is a
Of
term
vision
that
of
many people
graduate.
use
Yeah.
generally about what do we want our kids
I
to
know,
learn and know.
I
and be
went to
able
the
do.
course on it.
Okay.
I like
That
it.
was portrait of a graduate,
Portrait.
which
What's
is a
the
very
difference?
specific brand.
Ah.
A product or process you
Yeah.
can purchase. I think you and I were at that.
Yes,
Petco
yes,
somewhere
yes.
Far away from here.
Yes.
Vision
And
of a graduate is a more general global term,
Graduate.
A graduate.
but it is maybe an insider term.
Okay, well, I'm
Yeah, I
glad that I
found
asked the
it.
question because I'm a
Yes,
high
it's
school graduate.
Yes.
And they're interested, or I think
Of our
good
high school
processes,
graduate, or a
wonder
BHS graduate.
pre-K to 22, what are we doing and what are we interested in terms of what our kids learn, know, are able to.
Maybe
do?
identify consultant to assist with vision of a graduate, with vision of a BHS graduate. In quotes or something like that.
Can I make a couple of comments on this slide?
Of course.
Okay, so first, I think this looks great. I think from where this started and where it is now, I really appreciate you I feel like you really listened to us and you took into account our comments. So thanks. I feel really heard. I have just three really concrete suggestions, ideas. So the first is around the foundational years. I think it is worth proposing some measurements around the foundational year, which are strictly input based. And it's simply stating that some of the things we're proposing to do, we did in fact get done. So that we have a mechanism of holding ourselves accountable for the things that are listed on this slide. That's one. The second point is that I also think it's great that we have so much commitment to equity in this strategic plan, and that there are concrete output related metrics for equity. But there isn't anything beyond input level metrics relating to joint excellence and excellence in teaching, I think, which are which are similarly district goals. Instead, there are, I think, only input related metrics like MTSS. When I say output related, that to me is MCAS. Input is on, input seems to me to be PD. That doesn't go all the way to student achievement. So I think we do need something relating to excellence or academic achievement somewhere in the strategic plan as a metric. And if we feel, unless we feel that we're achieving at a level of excellence that we need to be at, which I don't think is what you think. So I think we need to have something relating to those first two district, no, sorry, I didn't mean to say goals, I meant core values. And the third comment is, given the inputs in the foundational and year one buckets around ELA, I think we should be able to say something in year three at the output level about literacy gains over the course of the period of performance for the strategic plan, not relating to gains since the year two implementation work, but over the course of the entire strategic plan. So I think we can say, and I leave it to you, Michelle, to determine what exactly you think is the appropriate metric. And I think we've already started to meet those gains. So I think this is actually low hanging fruit. But I think we can make a commitment to an output level metric relating to literacy gains as a result of these inputs. So those are my three suggestions for additions of indicators in this slide. Thanks.
You said over the life of the strategic plan.
For the last one, yeah, I think to me it's most appropriate in year three. If you think you could do a midline 1, 2, that's great. But at the very least, at the end of the strategic period.
Yeah, I don't know what you have. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, oh, for the ELA.
Well, this is specific to a subgroup, and so I'm gonna look to see if we can kind of consider what our overall.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we can use M-Class and the whatever the future one is.
For the overall, can I just say that, if our goal is to narrow the gap, our goal must be under 3 percentage points for overall. So it should be overall, 2 percentage points, and for Black and African American students, my minimum is 3%. Basically, your overall has to be lower because we don't want to accidentally widen the gap. Does that make sense?
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying.
On which.
For any of the
On all of
MCAS
this.
goals, like your goal for Black and African American students has to be more ambitious because we are really interested in narrowing the gap. So if you found that white students increase their scores by 4% and Black students by 3%, we actually would have good improvement, but an increase in our gap. So I would actually make that one goal through robust equitable inclusion, the percentage of students. Instruction, the percentage of students who meet or exceed expectation in ELA and math, as measured by the MCAS, will increase by 2 percentage points. For Black and African American students, we expect, in our efforts to narrow the achievement gap, we will expect an increase of at least 3 percentage points or something like that to make it clear that we're interested in overall improvement and a narrowing of the gap. No? Does that make sense?
It does.
It might be too complicated
I
as a
think
concept,
it's
but it's an
complicated as a
important.
concept, but I think we can
an
tease it
important one.
out as a metric. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I was
looking at
thinking
it here, it makes sense.
And it should happen. Because
Yeah.
if you're doing robust, equitable instruction, all boats should rise.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
should, but we need
To
somebody
make
else
sure.
to rise
So we need to
faster.
do
Yeah.
some other things too. It can't be just the robust.
Well, it's robust instruction that includes like SEL work, et cetera. It's not, I think it's.
Attendance and
Yeah.
and not just SEL. I think it needs, it may need homework clubs. It may need, all sorts of other things.
So,
Working more with the steps or something.
yeah, there's lots of things that we can do better, like field services. Natalia, the last on the year 3 benchmarks, the last goal, I believe it was you at the school committee meeting, was very concerned because we were talking about the 20% point.
Yeah.
So we reworked that to look at the number of students that were being referred and to look for disproportionality instead of the cap.
Yeah.
We felt that got at the same thing without
I
potentially.
guess what you
creating-
lose is what Stephen is talking, like the overall too, the cap was an overall cap, right?
Yes.
And now you're again only focusing, so you might need, I think what Stephen is asking us to do is to have overall and equity goals, like for everything. So even for this one, you may want something that, I mean, I don't know, Stephen, do you agree? This is for the, remember there was something about capping the number of students and that it might,
Go to CST.
Yeah.
The percentage of students who are
Yeah.
Receiving special education.
basically that could
services, so that's-
disincentivize.
You know what, I
Even-
think if we go back and look at what the percent, I think we'd have to go back and look at the current numbers, and then we could take another swipe at that. Yeah.
I'm having a little difficulty with using just MCAS as the way to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're,
You know?
Not wrong.
And I'm not sure what else we have.
The problem is we don't have anything right now. And this is an issue that we're working to ameliorate, which is we want to build robust common assessments as well as expand our use of a tool similar to MCAS for all the grades, not just through grade 3, and in math as well. However, we don't have those yet, so to write, and we don't know what they're going to be.
Doesn't the new math curriculum have,
It has,
isn't that more?
it has assessments, but we don't necessarily have common grading practices. I don't have confidence in the data. One of the problems that we have here in Brookline, in the interest of transparency, is confidence in our data being what it should be in all aspects of the organization. We're finding that there's discrepancies but in this particular case, in how teachers grade, how teachers approach that, how teachers are using that data. So that's part of our work that we need to do. And I think for the next strategic plan, you'll see a much more robust way of evaluating it other than
Okay.
MCAS.
Thank you.
Is the NAEP still used? Is that?
It is, but we don't get the results to be helpful for us, unfortunately.
Suzanne?
Jody, is that what's preventing us from excellence-related outcome metrics? Is your lack of, I think a lot of us would feel this way, but a lack of faith in MCAS is that indicator?
Yeah, MCAS wouldn't be what I would use as a sole indicator because it's not really formative and it doesn't really help you grow because by the time you get the data, it's so late in the cycle. However, it's the one thing that we have right now that is valid and reliable.
Jody, I think what we're missing right now is the ability to be using other metrics along the way to assess whether we're going to get there. So we would pivot what we're doing if we were doing that along the way. And so right now we have just the end data.
Yeah, we have to build that
And
assessment.
then
system.
build that so that as we're going along the way, we can say, are we doing it right? Do we need to pivot?
Sarah, you want to have your hand up?
As you see.
Yeah, this is perfect timing. So the thing that I wanted to address was the common assessments. And I wanted to just sort of say my comment and then get your thinking, Jody, around what you meant when you said common assessments there. So when I see the word common assessments, I think that what you mean is across a grade level within a subject to have common assessments. And I think the reason why I need to hear your thinking about it is because I get a little bit nervous about, usually a assessment is used for a teacher to be able to go back over and see if they need to reteach and kind of evaluate the group in front of them. And so how can that still happen with common assessments? Because if I need to in March be testing unit 3, just like everybody else who's in my subject group, does that allow me to really truly use assessment in the way that I'm pivoting and going back and teaching what hasn't been understood or going ahead quickly with a group that moves quickly? So I just want to hear your understanding of common assessments.
So that is exactly what a common assessment is. And I would take it even farther. We're talking across schools so that we have a full view of what's happening in the public schools of Brookline. However, if you build an assessment calendar wisely, you build in that time for reteaching once the teacher has done the assessment. So that would be the important key, is to build an assessment calendar with a window that allows for reteaching.
And those would be for common assessments. So
Yes.
You would still do your, if you get exit tickets or whatever,
Right.
little daily, looking at the homework around math, right? So I mean, there'd be lots of other assessments teachers could use, but there would be this common assessment, so we could have comparisons
Correct.
across classes and across the schools.
And the common assessment would account for different learning styles of the students in that group. It would still allow you to use student interest and student needs to determine what you are teaching in your class.
It would allow you to do, the common assessment wouldn't allow you to do that. You as a teacher would allow you to do that. I think first, Sarah, we're not there yet to differentiate the assessments. We actually need to have an assessment and an assessment calendar first, and then go through a cycle. And as we do that, we can talk about making those assessments more robust.
The student had an IEP with accommodations.
They would get those accommodations.
Accommodations, so there would be some differentiation allowed, even on a common assessment.
I just give us a time check.
Yes.
Were we expecting, we're planning to go through the entire.
Yes, we are planning on going through the
We're
entire
still on
thing.
goal one.
We're definitely gonna stop by 5.
Yeah, I thought we were on 2 already. No?
We're starting.
Yeah.
And we're discussing this again on Thursday.
We're discussing this again on Thursday.
Get one more.
But you'll incorporate some of the stuff we talked.
Oh, yeah.
Should we switch? We can switch.
Okay.
Go on, guys.
Are we
Okay.
gonna shift gears to
I don't know.
process?
You're okay
You're
staying
fine
with
to
us?
wait. Yeah, for the continuity of the presentation, I think we are totally fine
Okay.
to stay.
And we'll.
You might
You know what I
take
would
a
suggest?
email.
Let's just go through the benchmarks for year 1 and finish that up. Teaching and learning.
We do all year 1 benchmarks.
Right,
Okay.
and just do that, and then,
But we're already done with goal.
Yeah, we're already done with one.
yeah.
And wait, and remember.
We finished all the benchmarks for one?
You can Send whatever.
Yes.
you want.
Yeah, we're done. with
Yes, you can send whatever feedback you have to me. Just do it sometime tomorrow so I can have it
Yeah,
ready for
yeah.
Thursday. You can send whatever you have to me, and this is also our densest goal. So, yes.
And we also are saying that we don't want perfection to be the enemy of the good.
Yes,
Right, so it's never gonna be perfect.
it is not perfect.
ever. So,
And the next step is if school committee gives it the okay on Thursday, we'll be sending it out to all of the teachers, all of the families in town, along with a survey to get more feedback and input into
we're
it.
gonna bring it back to the school committee.
Committee in December for a vote to finally accept it, and then we'll have a strategic plan, which is really exciting.
I think on the process, maybe putting something about, we are using MCAS because this is the best data we have.
Yeah.
Would be a good thing, but we know that doesn't capture, like a few sentences on that would be helpful.
We definitely do that.
Can you put page numbers on these?
Yes. I'll add those in.
Okay, so we're gonna move to goal.
Yeah, let's move to goal 2, which is our community and connections, which is all about communication and a community engagement plan. And so for this, again, we broke it down. This is very similar to what you saw before. It's broken down into the phases that would be done each year. And then Neil, for the measurement piece of it, what Neil did is he looked at our current metrics for our website and was able to say, all right, we'll see, because we're redesigning the website, we'll see an increase of 20% in the traffic that is coming to our website. Our subscribers and followers will increase by 15%. People will engage with a 25% increase. So Neil worked all of these out. And then there'll be a survey with where we get families' input on their satisfaction.
How much traffic do we have now?
I would have to ask Neil about what the number is now.
I'd like to know what
Yeah.
the starting point is.
Yeah.
Because if it's at 80%, for instance.
Yeah.
We're starting with a
Jody,
good
when I
point.
think of these 5 buckets, going back to the original.
Yeah.
And, I kind of think of teaching and learning as teaching and learning, the
Yeah.
office of teaching.
Yes.
I think of community connections as teaching and learning and OSS. No,
No, it's really the way that it played out. It's really more communication, and this isn't all me. So somehow you guys left out, and you get me to kind of be the face of this and presenting.
for the whole thing, but that's why I kind of put different departments.
Yes.
So just to finish, climate and culture, I put as OSS.
Mhm.
And then resources management, I put as budget.
Yes.
And then governance, I put superintendent and senior administration.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
You got
It
it.
just helps me think about the buckets.
Yeah.
The buckets are what the study group
Yes.
came up with.
Yes.
Task force.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the district newsletter the superintendent's?
Yes.
Maybe we say that,
Okay.
because I wasn't clear if there's something new coming out or if it's the superintendent's.
So with communications, we don't really have a communications like person.
We have Neil. We have one person.
Neil, okay.
Neil is doing a great job.
Okay, great.
Where does the PTO feature or the PTOs in this community and connections?
It didn't feature in what the big group did. It didn't come up in the large group with families. So that's why it's not added in here.
At least for the school where my kids are, I feel like I get a lot of information from the PTO.
They do a huge amount of.
Yeah.
A lot of
So
work,
it
a lot of
seems like-
communication and
Yeah,
newsletters.
you might want to measure the amount of, he can do that too, people who open the PTO newsletters.
Yeah.
Or somehow like
Because that's
mentioning in the goals, I would say some sort of like, engagement, like seeing engagement, whether like how, anyways, I feel like you'll get more information either from the PTO, seeing how much engagement there is versus a survey to parents. Like I never complete those surveys. I don't know what your response rates are. Like so-
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell
I
him.
don't know.
I'm gonna tell him.
Natalia will complete a survey.
But yeah, and but I feel like we're highlighting a lot about formal communications, and a lot of the connection part is through informal kind of culture. I guess culture captures some of it. So I just worry that we,
Next one, yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's-
And
that's-
partnerships comes up in year 2, new partnerships. This is what we
Yeah.
were talking about last time, right? Yeah. Okay.
Well, actually, in climate culture, it's a lot of SEL curriculum and
There's family belongingness though there too. Let me see if I can find it.
okay, so we move on to 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's move on to 3.
You already had the goal of absenteeism in here. I just didn't read it. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I apologize.
I knew it was in there.
Yeah, I'm getting lost. I'm sorry.
There's so much here. And without the page numbers, it's easier for me because I'm looking at the slide numbers. So we will definitely add page numbers.
That's great.
Perfect, I'm already.
You're
I
also,
know if I went out of order, now I take it back. We on 3,
We are on goal 3.
okay,
Oh, you have it.
this is climate and culture.
Yeah, which is climate and culture. And again, you'll see the same thing. We broke it out by years. A lot of these are input measures. So a lot of them are, yes, we did it. I love this picture. A lot of them are, yes, we did it, or no, we didn't do it. One of our big goals is identifying an SEL curriculum for K-5, and a lot of our results, we're using the Panorama survey to measure our success rate with this. This is also where we have the attendance goal,
Yeah.
the absenteeism goal as well. you'll see things that the school committee is working on here. For example, finalizing the life of the school policy is something for the foundational year. So you can kind of see how the work spans across different groups. Matt,
You may want to put
Mhm.
that in, assign that to school committee or somehow, or is that stated in the, I'm sorry,
no, because we don't have goals for the foundational, yeah. For foundational, the foundational year.
You just have to own it, Helen.
Jody,
I know, but I mean,
Yes,
people who are
Stephen.
reading this don't understand it.
Jody, why no outcome or output metrics? Is it that it's just too hard to commit to any of them? Or is it
Wasn't
that?
that it's too hard to commit to? We felt that this was much more of an input year than an output year. And
But even
so
at the end of the strategic period? Is there,
the foundational year,
I was looking at the previous slide, even, I didn't see any across all of them.
for any outcome benchmarks,
Yeah,
go to the next slide.
Oh, after this.
Climate and culture year one benchmarks. Do you see that, Stephen?
yeah. Yep,
Is that what you were looking for?
it is.
Okay.
You know what you could do for benchmarks for this year? It like, here you have what the goal is for the following year, but collect data and begin strategies
Yeah.
for
You could do based
type of, sort of baseline stuff for all these things. So it helps us to see how we're going to move forward.
And so Matt, you'll notice Helen did
Yeah.
a foundational year benchmarks actually. And he did a really nice job. He was the one that helped fill this out, Dr. Dubois.
Oh, okay,
Helped
thank you.
flesh this out. And
That's why it's smaller print.
that's why it's smaller.
More to say.
He had a lot to say for us. But all of these, I'm confident now are measurable and easily implemented, which it was a big piece of feedback.
Tell me to be quiet because you have it here.
We do for this goal. We don't for the other goals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do for this one.
So will be finalized by the school committee.
Yes.
That's all.
I mean, I think one of the tricky things, right, is like the document can't include every single detail
Right.
and still be intelligible. Like part of the brevity helps, even though it doesn't provide all information. We just have to be okay with that.
I'm wondering, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Relationships with at least 3 new community-based organizations.
We
Think about
talked
it.
about this.
Yeah, we dropped it from 6. This was Stephen's idea.
Where are you gonna find, wait a minute, where are you gonna find 3 new?
It might, it could be the word new, or it could be revitalizing relationships that may have lapsed with community organizations.
Something new with old,
A new initiative. with
yeah,
an
new
old-
initiative with
Yeah.
old partners. Like I'm thinking of, public health or
Yes.
taking a look at what we do with them. And are there other things we might do?
Yeah.
Because how many, public health.
I mean, I was thinking mental health and there you don't have a lot of,
Although like one of the things Matt's been talking about is like with the trauma that's gone on this past several months, it becomes a new relationship when we change with our providers, how they're supporting our students. It becomes a new, that's
Oh.
something new.
oh,
So it's
okay,
not a new
not,
partnership, it's a new initiative.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not like we go out and meet somebody new, but he says, you know what, I need to use this person in a different way.
right.
And so he brings in the relationship.
Okay,
Because he and I were
I
talking
misread it.
exactly about that. No, it
No, I
it
think
reads,
it doesn't make
it
that
reads
sense.
the way you said.
It reads the way you said. We need
Yeah.
to clarify that.
This may be one of the pieces that is more living.
Mhm.
We'll find out by doing whether this is reasonable.
Okay,
All right,
We're moving.
we're moving.
we'll look at this.
Go for it. There's Gabe. I say that every time I open the slide. Here's Gabe. Gabe and Lisa. So-
And Linus's mug.
This was at the strategic.
Oh, working
plan.
on the strategic
It was.
plan.
That's where it was, I remember.
It was. So- Hi,
Oh,
come up with chair. Yeah,
Come on, sit here.
Join us, Susan.
so this is a fun picture. And you are absolutely right, Suzanne, with the bucket that you put this goal into. So you'll see that there's 4 major initiatives with this particular goal, which is around budget and resource
Oh,
management.
that's the perfect time.
Yes, Susan,
It's
Susan's
not till
timing
year
was.
4, you have time.
Yeah.
Oh, no, this is year 1 still.
And then you'll see again, the pattern continues with the foundational year and what's happening. And then these outputs, these measurable outcomes that Susan did are for the end of the plan. They're not broken out by year. This is the format differs a little
By year.
by year.
By the end of year 3.
Yes.
Yes.
But you have a lot of goals.
Yes. Yes, there's a lot to do.
Are you gonna include here no pandemic?
That's under control.
That's under the 10-year enrollment.
Yes.
I think goals 4 and 5 are a little outside the scope of the subcommittee, isn't it?
They are. They are. I just wanted you guys to kind of get a look at the whole thing, Stephen, as a rehearsal for Thursday.
Okay.
Well, we're in charge of budget. Not in charge, but I mean, we have to. approve
Yeah,
the budget.
there's an intersection there with resource.
Oh, the
curriculum.
subcommittee. Oh,
That's what I'm
sorry, the
saying, saying
subcommittee. Yes, I'm
subcommittee.
sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, they definitely are.
No, no, just, no, right.
And then,
Pass that on to finance.
Oh, we'll implement.
oh, yeah,
Sorry, I can't help it.
No.
So,
no, these are exactly what I need, because when you look at something, you all know how it
So-
is.
oh,
when
yeah.
You look at something a million times. Yeah, bad grammar starts to be good.
Yeah.
And then goal 5 is around designing and implementing an organizational structure and related information systems that will help us realize our vision. Basically, you have a very new senior leadership team. Dr. Guillory is in his 3rd year. Lisa's in her 2nd. Susan and I and Claire all just started. So one of the things that we realized after the initiative to the creation and dissemination of an organization chart is that we really need to look carefully at each of our departments and realign them, which we have a year-to-year plan for budgeting purposes that we would do that. You know, an example of what's unstated here is, for example, OTL, Office of Teaching and Learning, will be looking to realign and readjust in 2026 because there could be potential collective bargaining implications, and that's a bargaining year. So we were very thoughtful about the order in which we did that. OEE, Office of Educational Equity, comes first because there's only 2 of them, and how can we build that office out a little bit more was important there. And then the Office of the Superintendent comes at the end because if Linus wants to do any, Dr. Guillory wants to do any big changes, he'll have an opportunity once we've all been on board for a while to do that.
can I make a suggestion on the goal?
Yeah.
To achieve the district's vision. Not its, because it's just not clear who it's referring to. I'm not in, I didn't do that well in English,
Anthony is.
but I did correct all my
Yeah.
newspapers.
And then this one also, just because of the breadth of the goal, has a 3rd year. So by the end of year 3, these are the outcomes that would happen. So that's the strategic plan. Thank you all. Stephen, I'm happy you felt heard when you guys gave the feedback initially. I'm happy that you're seeing that incorporated here. And yeah, I look forward to presenting this again on Thursday night to the full committee. Please send me any suggestions or thoughts that you have. With that, I'll turn it back to Suzanne.
Yeah, which I'm gonna turn it over to, I think, Anthony and Hal. We're gonna, and you're probably part of that, and Gabe. And we're talking about the discussion of Brookline High School class sizes.
So.
That was a nice picture.
Wasn't that a great picture? I love that picture.
Yeah.
So we have 3 goals for tonight's, this afternoon's presentation. 1, to provide an overview of what Brookline High School's priorities are and the impacts that has had on the staffing, and thus the class sizes. Help us as a subcommittee understand the current status of class size. Where are we right now at the high school? And help us understand what would be required to restore what's a more typical class size at the high school.
Jody?
And
I already have a question. Is talking about K-8s out of scope for this conversation today?
yes,
Okay,
but we can do that at another point.
At the very
Okay.
end.
Yeah, we can do it at the very end.
okay, okay, thank you.
So I'm happy to step in and start by saying thank you for having us, curriculum subcommittee members, and thank you to district leaders who have been supportive of our concerns around class size. So both, I think it's important to note that Gabe, over the last couple of years, has been embedded in our sectioning process where budget really comes into play, how we're using our resources. And in a similar way, Jody and Susan and Linus have been concerned as well, curious about how we use our resources and engaged in how we can support having good class sizes. So one of the beauties of Brookline High School is our rich set of offerings. We offer so many courses, and that's wonderful. It makes sectioning and budgeting really complicated. So I think what we would name, and we'll get into some more detail about staffing priorities, is we have made some program enhancements. We see some important program enhancements that we want to be making in particular departments. And so we're going to talk about those tonight. And then recently we presented to the whole school committee about reimagining 9th grade, which to me is largely about how do we reconsider how we acculturate kids to the core academic experience at the high school, with the notion that we want our classes to look like our student body. We want all kids to have access to the rigor that we offer. And currently that is not the experience of all kids at Brookline High School. And so the notion of how we're having kids enter and have access to really good 9th grade experiences is incredibly important. You've heard these numbers for the most part. I think there may be one additional number, so I'll run through them quickly. We knew that we had Brookline High School Innovation Fund resources to reimagine our restaurant program. It is one of our largest programs. It is definitely one of our most diverse programs, demographically and pretty much in all ways. And so we have a much larger restaurant, physical plant wise. And so we knew that coming off the innovation fund, there would be resources required. And so within our sectioning process, we subtracted 0.6 FTE from the beginning, knowing that that was a shared and communicated priority. Similarly, we knew that Hub Advisory, which we reimagined over a few years, that the cost of the advisory program would come back to the high school. And so we went from a model where we were more funded within advisory to what we thought was a reasonable number to have somebody creating lessons for all kids in the high school at all 4 grades, in all 4 grades. And so that was 0.4 FTE. And then we have an AAPI leadership program and an advisory. And one of the decisions that I made and we made was to support Sydney Ho, who's a really wonderful teacher, to think about what an AAPI leadership program would look like, what support she would need. And so part of that has been a new offering that this curriculum subcommittee supported us offering in Asians in US Lit course. And I don't know that I have the exact title right, but essentially a course that could satisfy the 11th grade English requirement, but also 12th graders could take. You can't take it twice in a row, but we wanted as much access to that course as
The
possible.
0.2 was to teach it?
No, the 0.2 was to essentially research, develop it.
It's essentially like program leadership because there's the AAPI focused advisory, as well as some other sort of, I'll say extracurricular programming and club advising and things like that.
So does the 0.2 continue into next year?
It's a good question. I don't think so. It's something to consider, but I think of it as in this year of core development, that's important, but we need to be thinking about resources over time. And so that's a conversation that I'll be having with Sydney and others who are doing that really important work. The last piece is a program that we've had for many years, Teachers Mentoring Teachers, core to how we acculturate and support new staff. For a while, we had a structure in which one teacher had a course release and a science teacher, and let's not dive deep into this rabbit hole, but an AP science teacher only had a partial release. And so she was not able to as fully engage in that leadership role, and it's core. It's how we bring groups of people, groups of educators into the school and support them. So last year, those were the decisions we made budgetarily, and we will continue to support Teachers Mentoring Teachers, advisory, and a reimagined restaurant. I think we need to think about that lead piece.
How many new teachers do you have every year, more or less? I mean, on average?
Well, you can speak.
20 to 25, yeah. New hires.
Mhm.
And this is a cohort model where they meet.
Yeah, I know
regularly,
exactly what
and
it is.
it's-
I was involved with the
initial
when the
that's
Innovation Fund.
And some of them are experienced elsewhere and some of
Yeah,
them,
I mean, district,
Anyone new?
yeah, district.
anyway, new to us.
District.
Oh, this is district-wide. This isn't just the high
This
school.
is just the high school.
Just the high school. Thank you.
You get about 20 to 25 new hires in Unit A to the high school every year. And district-wide, about half of our new hires are what we would call novices, so in their first 3 years of the profession. And then the other half are new to us with experience, approximately.
But they still need the mentoring to get
Yeah.
to understand Brookline. And
For sure, understanding the complexity of the high school, the culture of the high school. I said thank you to everyone. I didn't say thank you to Hal. Hal is the brains behind our sectioning. And so he's here to answer questions. And I think future program enhancements. Do you want to speak to CTE and visual arts?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about for years is that we have essentially had level staffing in career and tech ed and in visual arts for a long time. You know, and we don't, it's less obvious that there's need there because the classes fill and the classes fill. But what happens then is that we have kids that are unsatisfied or may find some other, maybe they'll fill in other places and take other courses. They might be taking a social studies course, they might take a performing arts course. But the reality is there's much more demand than the staffing levels that we have. We can easily fill, you know, in CTE, we could easily fill teachers in both of these areas with full classes that would satisfy, you know, several hundred more kids in taking what we consider to be really important courses at the high school. And the levels are basically the same since we had 1,750 kids. You know, 12 years ago, we had 1,750 kids. We have almost 2,200 now. So 450 more kids being served by the same number of art teachers. And it's a really glaring hole, and it puts pressure
Is
on
2.0
everyone
enough?
in the schedule.
Is 2.0 enough?
I could certainly fill the classes if we.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's an important question and what it is we want to do, you know, if, and it sort of ties into what the requirements are for graduation, but
One of the things when we looked at sectioning last spring is we could probably fill 2.0 in visual arts alone based on student requests. And then kind of Hal sort of alluded to it, but the piece here that's different is many of these classes are capped due to safety or materials, like if we don't have more wheels or ceramics.
Right, and we're limited by wheels, we're limited by the number of teaching stations in the family consumer science classes, so we have a limited number of kids there. And
so it's sort of a hidden part of the class size issue where we can't throw 30 kids in the class, so it doesn't come up in the same way, but we want to make sure to acknowledge it here.
but do they fill to 20 kids?
It depends on the course to some extent.
yes,
But I would say visual arts.
visual arts absolutely fill. You know, there's maybe one or two advanced level classes that are not filled, but they're close. And in CTE, yes.
Can I ask an overarching question now that you mentioned do you have the data on all courses about how many apply and how many are not? Like, can we see that at some point later, like for math, science, all the, and just to see where, I mean, the question is like, is this demand issue particularly, like, are you for these two, or are you also seeing it for AP Chem? Like I've heard like AP Chemistry or AP Biology are also classes.
AP Chem is the one example, so of the
Yeah.
course where we don't get every kid into the seat.
But
And
in
AP
general.
Computer Science, which is related to the CTE issue, is not the other. Those are the two areas where we have kids outside of CTE, outside of visual arts. Those are the two courses where I have more requests than I have seats available for kids.
Because the seats or it's staff?
Well,
They're
well,
linked.
how much FTE we could devote to AP chemistry in the overall scheme of trying to fulfill all the course selections, choices.
Kind of comes up to some extent later, but like in theory, we could offer another AP Chemistry section, but it comes at the cost of an honors chemistry section or a standard level chemistry section. And as a school, the school has made choices to hold tight course size at standard or honors, allowing.
Now,
AP
that part I understand, but when we get to the 36, I mean, yeah, class of 18 is harder. I mean, that's the difficult piece, I think.
Well, chemistry is uniquely capped for safety reasons.
They're a hard cap at 24, but Natalie, to your question,
You would have demand potentially to have two classes if that was a decision, like, are you rejecting
You do have 4 sections this year.
or like?
May I make a
seconds.
friendly request to avoid the weeds a little bit so that we could get to the meat of this presentation? Because I feel like the heart of this is what, I'm sorry, I'm very anxious to get to the heart of this presentation. So
Okay.
can I ask for that?
Yes, but later, the data for me is interesting just to know like the distribution of class size, like how many classes have like under 20, how many, like
That's coming.
if that's coming up, then it's
Right.
fine. Yeah, so.
and the
How many
data
kids-
is
yeah,
available to you
yeah.
in terms of course selections and
How many get selected out?
sections. Yes.
I'm sorry, Stephen.
Yeah.
All right, I'll move quicker. Gabe just gave me that face, which is fair. And just in terms of reimagining ninth grade, you've heard this. In order to support a pilot for this year, a pilot for this year with the idea of expanding fully to all ninth graders or essentially all ninth graders. We have 2 English course releases at 0.25 apiece, plus a special educator at 0.2. So that's a 0.7. That we took out of sectioning using our budget to support a really important initiative that I think dovetails nicely with overall district work around access and equity. For next year, we are talking about supporting physics and geometry in reimagining ninth grade. And I want to be super clear with this group. Some people are using the term de-leveling and concerns about de-leveling. I want to be super clear that we're going to work with the math and physics team to figure out what's the right model for a reimagined ninth grade course, knowing that there, I think, is particular concern in this community around science experience and rigor and math experience and rigor. year. Not to say that there aren't similar, values around social studies and English. But so in order to do similarly, 2 course releases for both physics and geometry departments plus special educators, it's a total of 1.2 FTE, which is an increase of 0.5 from last year. So the English will shift out of course releases because they will be launching. We will add 0.7 to get to a 1 point.
Yeah, and this is consistent with the model that social studies had when they designed the LISP course. They had teachers released with planning time to do the design, to do the research. It's working so far really well with the English pilot. And so in order to effectively support the other departments, feel like we need to do it. And as we've discussed, and as you'll see in a second, we show the class size numbers, it's come at a cost of class size. And it would come at a greater cost of class size if we expand that further. And we want to be able to support physics and math. One of the things that the physics team in particular has been very clear about is they don't want to redesign a course and have it be worse.
Yeah.
And so
No,
we have
absolutely.
to invest in making sure it's
So
effective.
the 0.7 this year for the English, the FTE, not the person, but the FTE will go down to the
Correct.
next year.
Correct. That's why it's a change of 0.5.
Yeah.
So can we at some point, not, obviously,
Sure.
get some feedback on how the social studies is working?
Sure.
I think that's really important to know. Before we sort of dive full force into all of this, is this working? Are there lessons to be learned? And, what, I think physics and geometry are much harder than social studies and English,
Agreed. That's the
and I'd like us to get that down well. And then maybe worry so much about physics and geometry, but that's my own sense.
No, but I think just the spirit of let's take the time to do this well and let's respond to the most important people doing this work, the educators, and what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, what their kind of feedback they're getting. So happy to do that.
And questioning whether you should move that goal to, instead of FY25 to FY26 or 27, and see that we've done the other well first. I
Yeah,
don't know.
we're writing a balance with,
You have looked at social studies. That's one of the reasons you went forward with
Yeah.
English. So yes,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, but
add
this
it
is
to it.
2 or 3 years later.
and the ninth grade teachers have been in regular communication with their other colleagues and other departments. And that's actually been part of why the physics team felt the need to put on the brakes a little bit. As we've kind of done the research, as really the team and Ed have done the research. We're not sure there is another school that does physics in ninth grade and does it in a heterogeneous way.
Mhm.
And so if we are going to be the first and create this, we need to really invest and be thoughtful, right? And so again, this is where we are right now.
And you would do this as a pilot. I mean, or no,
These releases would be for planning and design.
right, but you're not putting the whole program. I mean, the program's not fully implemented. You're going to
I
have.
think-
it.
I think
that's-
to be determined also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so for example, social studies went full. English is doing a pilot. We're trying to be responsive to the departments, to the team.
Oh, okay.
And something that at least we've gotten some feedback from the physics team is they're so collaborative already. Doing a pilot almost feels disingenuous to have it work. So, and math might be different, right? And this is, and they're coming for different
Thought it
reasons.
through, so that's.
Yes.
Well, and we're in the process of thinking it through, and I made very clear to Josh Barris meeting with him today, we're going to determine with your team what is the right timeline and the right, what is the right process. It's not for us to decide on high. So we're going to offer just an overview, and Steve, these are the pieces you likely want to see, and you saw an earlier version of this. So our current sizes and these numbers know that 26 plus students, the 104 does include the 38 that are 28 and above and the
Mhm.
30 plus that are
okay.
above. Nonetheless, we have 104 out of 700 and what was 785, that's not up there, but 785 total courses, 104 of those, so similar to a seventh, are above 26 students, and then you have 38 and 22. So I can pause there, or we could, well, okay, good. So this is now look over time, and I think there were some questions early on why we had not included some years. Hal, do you want to speak to this slide?
Yeah, I pulled up just a sample of years. I tried to avoid some of the pandemic years because we were doing class sizes differently. We were building classes in a different way, and budgets were different. So I just tried to look at last year versus this year. And then I just went back to some pre-pandemic numbers and just pulled from 2 sample years to take a look and just give us a basis for comparison. I certainly could give any other numbers if you want. If you want to look at the pandemic numbers, we could certainly give you the same ideas, or even go back further in time. I have all the data going back, 15 years or so.
Are we going to see also the lower end? How many classes of 15 or
I don't know if
below?
we have a slide for it, but I could certainly tell you what is
Okay.
there. Yeah.
And I think we would, as we will sort of annotate some of these numbers, I think it would be important for us to annotate what courses are carrying 15 or below, not to rationalize, but well, to tell you what the thinking is behind that. So perhaps to rationalize, not saying that it's objectively true or right.
I mean, off the top, it's almost entirely special education and tutorial courses that are.
Well, the ones that, yeah, I'm not even counting those.
Yeah.
Not counting those as part of the numbers, but I mean, there are of classes 17 and smaller, there are 24 classes total in high school. And I think there's some interesting data in that. Some of those are some drama classes that are a little bit on the small side. Some of them there's 1 or 2 wellness classes that just didn't fill well because of where they are. They're very hard to fill. They're two blocks separated by days. So sometimes some of them get super crowded. Some of them don't fill really well. So that a yoga class of 14. But if you look at my yoga classes on average, the average is probably 25 in the yoga. IMP math. I have 2 sections of IMP math, one of which has 17, one of which has 16. And this is the type of split that we come to often when we're doing sectioning. There are 33 kids that want this class that are continuing along that haven't taken the IMP math 1 and 2, and now they've moved into IMP 3, but there's only 33 kids left in that class, but 33 would be too much for an IMP. Whereas, it's too much for any class, but if it was BC Calc, I'm less troubled by 33 kids at BC Calc, but 33 kids taking IMP 3 would not work. Now, the level of interaction the teacher has with kids in that class, the level of attention kids need in that class, it doesn't work. So they're too small, but they're too small because those are the only 2 sections that I'm running of a class like that. Same thing, French 2 advanced. Where do I make a split for a class like French 2 advanced? I'm not sure if I don't remember if this is the only one, but one section for whatever reason has 15 kids. It should have more. French 2 advanced should have 25 kids at least. But just because French world language is one of the hardest things for us to schedule because you've got so many different levels and it's essentially 5 different departments. So in order to make that work, sometimes you wind up with classes that break at bad numbers. But like the numbers overall, most of these classes, are beginning Spanish 1, Japanese 1. One of the sections is 17, physics 1, 17. Almost all of them, 15 and below, there are only 10 classes. Again, this is not counting learning centers. This is not counting
Special programs.
special programs, none of that at all. Just in the schedule, 10 classes, 15 and below.
So the comparison is mostly stark. Last year, we had a number of classes over 26, but more than double over 28 and quite a few more over 30.
Yeah, especially when there was the same size school, 2080 and 2087.
So there's about 100 more students.
Yeah, 100 difference.
It says 2080 and 1718.
I think it's 223,
2080.
yeah.
And 22, 23, there's
All right.
2087,
Yeah.
but it's changed already.
Yeah, we had pushed up for sure.
Yeah.
We had already, we experienced.
Those are some cut years too.
Yeah.
Meaning budget cut years. Hal, do you want to speak to, I mean, this is just giving you a sense.
These are the classes that are over 30. And you see, so 5 sections of AB Calc are over 30. Both sections of our BC Calc are over 30. One section of Human Geo is 30. The other, I'm pretty sure the other 4 are 29 or 28.
There
One
are
of the-
4 sections of human geography.
There are 5.
5.
It's become
Very popular
wildly
class.
popular.
What's human geography? I'm sorry.
It's
Migration.
yeah, it's like human migration, population density, culture.
Social studies.
We discontinued AP Euro and at some point made a shift to what we thought was a more accessible, more kids interested.
Yeah.
That's probably over. the
Check
last-
that 4 sections. 4 sections of AP.
And
Calc,
is
Human
it, from a teacher perspective, is it the same teacher that teaches those 4?
Geo.
or
We have
they're
2 different teachers.
two
doing
different
Human
teachers?
Geo.
And for the AP Calc, it's.
That's
At
split
least 2
among
would be AB. and not 3.
Well, there's one who teaches the BC, both sections of BC. And I've got 3 other teachers doing the 6 sections of AP Calc.
I don't think any teacher teaches a full slate of AP classes.
That is correct.
I just feel bad for the teacher that has 60 students.
And then you add in your other
And
couple
the other
classes.
classes, yeah, like if there are a few
Yeah.
teachers with.
You know, there's a qualitative difference. The teaching a 31, so one of the sections of BC Calc has 31 kids. And a few of the sections of AB Calc have 31 kids. That's very different. Even, our kids do great on both of those tests, but the level of attention and how much support individual kids need among the 31 in the AB class versus the BC class is very different. The teachers would have very different experiences with that same number of class, with the same number of kids in the class.
So I would just say most of those courses from AP statistics above are pretty much entirely seniors. And then when you get into Spanish 3 advanced and 4 advanced, you're talking some sophomores, some juniors, and AP US almost entirely.
And you can be sure that if you run back one slide, Gabe, if you went back to this slide, those 8 classes with 30 over and those 19 classes, you can bet those were the same classes. You can bet those in the BC Calc classes, the AP Calc classes, the
AP language.
English classes for sure.
So
It's the same.
do you make a conscious decision because they're AP to allow more students? in?
Yes.
Sure.
And I
It's a conscious decision to have standard classes, which I think you still have lower,
Right.
For
like
sure.
18 to 20.
Yeah, it's sort of a progression of class size with standard or college prep in sort of one category, honors in another category, and advanced and AP are the largest.
And at the 9th grade level and even at the 10th grade level, we're building the schedule in a way that we may intentionally have some of those advanced classes be at a higher number to begin the year, knowing that a number of kids are going to filter down into the honors level or from honors to standard. So we intentionally build it so the classes are in the same block, so it's less disruptive to move a kid. And we also do it because we know from experience that a certain percentage of kids and that the coordinators will certainly be looking at their historic attrition rates from classes and know that it's okay. They don't mind if the average starts at something like 28, knowing that the class is going to come down to an average of 26 or 25, and don't start with the honors classes at a lower number, knowing that push those classes to higher numbers.
And are we talking about co-teaching classes at all? Is that?
These are, none of the numbers that you see here would reflect co-teaching classes.
None of them
Those
are
are the
co-teaching.
largest. Historically, would be 2021, 22. With this year, there may be a couple that are 22, 23 with the co-teaching numbers.
That's co-teaching with special ed.
Correct.
Hal, will you speak to why we have 22 classes listed for 30 plus students, but that list on the next slide is something like 16?
This is Sam.
I think we're talking like chorus.
Because those are the numbers that Gabe put up on that first slide were from the initial numbers that I ran in September, and those classes have dropped. But not much out of the range of 20. The number of 26 over is almost the same, but it has definitely shifted to some degree down. So it was 22 in September, I think, when I did these numbers initially. Now I believe it's 16 that are 30 and over. And again, that's not counting my orchestra classes. That's not counting my journalism.
Right.
That's what I thought.
At larger numbers. So there are additional classes. If you were just looking at the raw data, you'd see larger numbers for some other classes, but the courses that we're talking about.
But they're typically not the science classes.
None of the science, yeah, this is the
Because I
first.
thought that's
year
what
that
We
we
got an
pushed
email from a
science
science
full-time.
teacher who was very concerned that
Yeah,
that it was
that's
not
right. We were
safe in
very-
their
Yeah,
classroom.
we were very good about holding the numbers in science at 24. And we
I
were
think
pretty
they had,
hard
at the
in
beginning,
most
they had
science
like-
classes, and we pushed those higher this year because we were pushing math numbers to levels that were higher than we've ever had. It didn't seem fair to not put that same pressure on science.
There's some differences between the different sciences.
Yes.
Chemistry is much stricter of a class cap than biology, for example, because of the nature of the work students do.
I don't know, they were cutting up sheep's hearts when I was there. I was, I don't think I went 35 kids in there doing.
Well,
35 kids in
it's ahead
the
of
science lab.
Can-
course,
can-
absolutely.
The
Before you
sheep
move
are
on, can I
already dead.
just-
You know.
Can I just ask, since math seems to be an issue, like, are we going to discuss like adding potentially a math teacher and like, is that even in the discussion? Like, isn't,
Well, let's get through
Okay,
this. Let's get through the presentation.
Yes, that is sort of.
It's a great segue because we're going to highlight math a little bit. So Josh Paris did a historical analysis of sections. And this will kind of build, so hang with me on the story a little bit, and then you can ask some questions. So we can see pretty quickly, right, enrollment numbers. So the closest enrollment to the current is this 18-19 school year, where Josh was able to run 94 sections of math, right? And that's K or 9 through 12, right? Geometry, trig, calculus, all of them.
And just to be clear, math is required 4 years?
It is 3 years, but we are very explicit that in order to access a state university or college, you need 4. So when I think about vision of a graduate, one of my areas of focus is we're not doing right by students by saying 3 years.
Almost every student takes 4 years of math. Now, in 2023-24, right, with more students, we're only running 86 sections of math. It's with 8 sections fewer. So just that gives us a sense of class size would be larger, right? We have,
So why?
well, for a variety of reasons, the high school's been asked to make cuts to staffing as part of the
That's
district,
budget.
the
That's-
district budget cuts. And then.
Wait. That you're down 2 FTE, right?
Yeah. Yes,
That doesn't explain why this would be down 2 sections
it's 8 sections.
sections
Yeah.
doing?
from 88 to 86.
Oh,
Oh.
no.
Let's look at the wrong.
From 18-19,
Yeah, but I'm talking about the cut. So from 88 to 86, 2 FTEs is not 2 sections. So that explanation doesn't fully explain that.
well, this is 2 sections in math alone.
Right. So that really doesn't explain that. 2 FTEs doesn't translate to 2 math sections.
0.4.
No, I'm saying over the last, whatever this is, 5 years, there's been a reduction in sections. I'm not talking about a 1-year change.
And it's 2 FTE because you have 8 sections and then the additional 2 sections. So teachers in math have 5 teaching responsibilities.
Right. I'm just saying that the underlying demographics for this past year, if I understand it right, is an additional 90 students enrolled and the high school's down 2 FTEs, right? So I'm listening to this, trying to understand the other factors at play and what may be a perfect storm, right?
There were also FTE reductions in 21-22. Right, so some of this is compounded over time. And so, and some of this has been choices about repurposing FTEs. So like, for example,
Okay.
the releases that the teachers are doing this year for reimagining 9th grade, that comes at the cost of class size in the school at large. Right. I think the point is, like, when we look at what folks have been used to in terms of class size, we had more FTE with fewer students in the building.
How many FTEs? do you-
I'm sorry, but the growth of this, I'm sorry about my tone. This is me simply trying to understand the growth of 30 plus classes from 2 to 32 in the space of 1 year. So I'm trying to list all the factors in my head so I have the fullest picture of what happened in the space of 1 year. So I appreciate the longitudinal view, and I appreciate there has been a number of factors over the past 6-7 years that have led to this point. But last year there was 2 sections over 30. This year there's 22. So something happened in the past 1 year that we have to account for,
We have 90 additional kids.
and 2 fewer FTE.
Fewer FTE than we had from last year. So
Is that what?
there should have been an FTE rise commensurate, excuse me, with adding 90 kids, which we did not receive because of the
Right.
budget.
So is that the explanation? Is 90 kids minus 2 FTEs equals an additional 20 classrooms over 30?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm looking to understand. That's the math.
Plus, I would say some repurposed FTE. I think,
About 1.4 according to that initial slide.
yes,
About 3.4 FTE plus 90 kids means there was that many classes on the tip of the iceberg, and it pushed about 20 of them over.
I think that's
Okay.
fair. I mean, one of the things that it comes up a little bit later, but around prior to 1920 or prior to the pandemic, when the high school saw an increase in class size or in enrollment, that often came with FTE. And so I think the number we cite, right, it's about 15 students would equal about 1 FTE.
Somewhere between 12 and 15 students should equal 1 FTE historically. That's
In each department or total?
total. If I added 12 with 15 more kids to school, somewhere in that range has been historically the equation that would equate, that would bring on 1 additional
It's
FTE.
like the marginal, so it's not if you divided students by FTEs, you would get 12. You have a different equation. I mean, that would be helpful for us, for me, new to school committee, to see underneath there, not just for math, but FTEs
What
over the
FTEs would
years.
show, sure.
Yeah, just,
We can certainly do that.
I'm going to complicate things for just a moment. Say that in the district and the high school approach to reductions, a conscious, explicit decision we made was to make cuts wherever possible aligned with attrition. So when there was a retirement in math, we took advantage of that
Sure.
retirement. It didn't mean, it meant we were not letting go of people that we might otherwise have let.
Well, in a different version of a reduction, we might have said math reduced by 0.2, science reduced by 0.2, world language reduced by 0.2. But because of the desire to do by attrition and not hurt staff who are currently here, it has been uneven. Right? And so math got hit a couple times because they had sort of convenient retirements, right? Similarly, I don't have a slide for it, but the English department has 6 fewer sections now than they did prior to the pandemic. And that equates exactly with the 1.5 FTE in retirements that they had. And so
that 1.5 retirement plus the 1.5 that are being used for reimagining English.
0.7, yeah.
0.7.
Yeah.
But
So the English department is running fewer sections than they did before as well. Every kid takes an English class, right? It's the 4-year requirement. So class sizes are larger. So I think, again, just to kind of highlight this a little bit, this is a thorough breakdown of just geometry. And so this is number of sections as well, right? So I've split out college prep geometry, geometry co-taught, which is a college prep class with a co-teacher, geometry honors, geometry advanced, and then the total sections of geometry. Okay, so it's just the 9th grade class. So you can see, I mean, plus 1 or 2 sections means class size shifts of a few students, right? And our 9th grade cohorts are larger now than they were before. So 23 sections on what, approximately 550 students is more students per class than 24, 25 sections with fewer 9th grade students.
Can we talk about co-taught for just a moment? Just how does that figure in your budget? Are those
So-
already, are they learning center people that have already been there, that pulled out to do math? Are these additional hires? Or how do we budget that?
It's additional hires. And it's
Okay.
not, we don't stop offering learning centers. Every kid has a learning center, and IEP has a learning center. So they're still teaching as many learning centers. And, the number of kids who have co-taught requests has grown substantially.
Well, yeah, you can see from 3 to 5, it's
Yeah.
almost double.
Yep.
And that's true, not just in math, that's true across the board, and that's true.
So
as kids
that's a big
move
hit on
up.
budget.
It's a big hit on math.
Absolutely.
We aren't talking about that at all.
And it begins, I mean, it's sort of a premise for sectioning is we know our special ed administrator comes in and says, these are what IEPs call for, that we will need X number of sections in math, in science, in English, in social studies. Those are the four core subject areas where we offer co-teaching. We do not currently offer co-teaching in world language.
The class size isn't necessarily larger, they just have 2 teachers in the.
It's not
Correct.
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 And it's 2 teachers, but you were saying one is a math teacher and one is a special.
Right,
ed.
one is a content area teacher, and we try to blur those lines for kids, but somebody, yes, you've got one bringing to bear.
I suspect that's going to continue to increase as
Yeah.
more people talk about inclusion.
And this is a thing the special ed department is investigating, right? Like, obviously, we are obligated to offer students the least restrictive services. And so we want to make sure that if co-teaching is on an IEP, it is necessary. But we also, if you fill a class with only students who have co-teaching on their IEP, right, it's no longer a general ed environment.
Right.
And so this pushes the number of sections required as we see. Right? And so for the last 2 years, we have offered no college prep level classes in math, in geometry that are not co-taught. Right? All of the college prep classes are co-taught.
Oh, along with the geometry co-taught?
Well, as you can see right here, right? Like, so the
Oh,
co-taught.
oh,
is a-
I see,
is
I
a
see what
college
you,
prep.
oh, so that's why it's increased. Okay,
But yeah, and you can see, right, this is kind of related to some of the other conversation. We used to offer 10 sections at the college prep level. We're only offering 5 now, right? Like, honors has increased a bit, advanced has increased.
uh-huh.
We used to only have 4 sections
That's
in
a good
advanced,
thing.
we now have 6. I think we might debate whether that's a good thing. There are a lot of students who sign up for advanced and it is extremely difficult for them.
But does it follow then that students on IEPs and 504s are disproportionately represented in large classes this year?
No, in the
No,
prep
no.
class, in the co-taught one.
Co-taught.
College prep and co-taught classes we're holding at smaller class sizes intentionally.
Smaller
Oh,
class sizes.
Yeah, it's the honors and AP and advanced classes that are larger.
Okay.
Let me move on to,
So I just wanted to call out and kind of compare, because that 18-19 was is the closest year in terms of enrollment, right? If we just think about staffing ratios and kind of how many staff we provide. So 2 sections might not feel like a lot, but that's just at the 9th grade level, right? And so if you think 2 sections at 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th, that's now about 2 FTE for the math department alone to kind of bring it back to 18-19 levels in terms of course offerings. It's just trying to illustrate that. And again, English is similar. Social studies has been sort of less impacted by retirements, so they've been a little bit more stable. Science has had some impacts as well. All right. So for what's next, based, or I don't remember if this,
Oh, is it? Well,
it's pretty self-explanatory.
yeah, we should hold steady for next year in terms of our total numbers. So Susan's office is running enrollment projections. It sounds like 3 different sets of projections. And our number currently is to increase by 8, as I recall. So we will hold steady in terms of our enrollment. And if we keep staffing at the same level, we should expect the same class sizes. So, you know, I think for us, what's predictable is preventable, and that's what we're trying to think about together and think with you. And then the following year, things hold pretty steady after that. Is my
And then
understanding.
start to, yeah.
And then we even start to decline a little bit.
So we're not expecting like 3 years we'll have to keep increasing FTE.
It's like next year will be like a bit of a course correction. After the $1.85 million cut, you know.
Will there be course correction or will it be just as bad?
Well, if we don't change anything, it will be just as bad.
Yeah. So in order to course correct, we need to add 4 FTEs, is what you're saying, right?
Well, so
I-
Well,
Yeah,
there's,
so-
there's
You read it
different-
quickly.
Yeah.
You were quick.
Yeah, so I think this is where, we can make some decisions, and I think we have to think about tolerance as it comes to class size and what this community and what our schools can tolerate. But certainly if we want to get back to where class size has been historically, it would require a significant investment. There have been, is it 3 years in a row now, we haven't had the added FTE with the additional students? Is that? Or is it been longer than that?
No, we've had.
But you had a lower population.
And then-
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 2,000 as opposed
Well,
to
we had-
2170,
Yeah, that was in the pandemic year, yes.
right? And before that was 2,100 or something.
What is our student to staff ratio? How is that?
That's good.
I want to say it's about 12 to 1. That's very, don't quote me on that. Those numbers also include non-instructional staff, so like counselors and nurses.
Right.
It's similar to other towns around us based on the DESI data.
And that hasn't changed, is what we're saying.
No, but if you look at how many classes are under 15, you'll find the problem.
It's a problem, let's say.
The issue, excuse me.
We,
Sorry, not the problem.
Allison, we don't have many classes under 15.
Yeah, there,
Tutorial and learning centers.
And ACE,
ACE enrollment is certainly a topic worth discussing. They're currently capped at 48 to foster the sense of community and the individualized educational experience. I think there is a question about whether they have the capacity, given the increased enrollment across the school and the scarcity of resources. I think there is a conversation before sectioning and within sectioning about what helps ACE retain the wonderful educational experience kids have, while also allowing more students access to that. I will say that because the overall N is so small, it even going from capping at 48 to capping at 60, it gets 12 kids into the program taking 4 core academics. So it's not nothing, but it's something that we will certainly talk with Amy about.
but 12 kids would be 1 FTE across the school.
No, it's, yes, agreed.
Is that true of the other special programs, Excel and Winthrop House?
Excel and Winthrop House are IEP based.
Okay.
And
So
so,
capped very much.
yeah, they're pretty strictly capped. And I think in some ways, maybe speaking out of turn, but I think Sarah would say that Winthrop House could take more students. We just don't necessarily have the capacity to add them.
And I don't know the exact numbers right now, but I would say that with a good deal of confidence that Winthrop House has been full at the cap at 8 kids per grade times 4 grades, 32 kids, certainly last year and this year. In terms of SWS, we've kept that cap at around 125 students. And our measure for that has been sort of what ways can a large program like that continue to foster the sense of community they have. And that's a number that Dan Bressman, the program coordinator, has held pretty firmly to, based on what I believe social psychologists have to say on the
And that
matter.
is also running at full capacity. We deny students from SWS every year.
Yes, because I don't know enough about ACE and SWS. Their classes are separate from these classes. They have their own, what is class size? Or do they take classes across? They have their own,
We should probably talk about them separately.
yeah.
Right.
it's different.
They're 2 separate,
You should
very
talk
different
about
programs.
SWS.
SWS runs all of their own English classes, so their English classes are fully within SWS.
How many
So
kids?
Those are between 20 and 23. They're running multi-level classes, multi-grade classes, kids are 10, 11, 12th grade, half-year classes, very writing intensive. They also run 1 chemistry section, 2 biology sections, and 2 social studies sections, 1 or 2 social studies sections as well. So kids usually are required to take 2 classes within SWS, the
And the
English
rest
and
are-
1 other.
Yes,
class.
and the rest
And the rest of the classes, they're back in the mainstream.
So students might take their English class and their science class in SWS and then go take an AP US history class as a junior, right? It's a mix.
ACE is much clearer. 48 kids, 12 per class, taking all 4 core academics in ACE. Then in other classes, electives and world language in particular, they're doing that in the mainstream.
Increasing that, I mean, if these kids are able to succeed in the mainstream with 30, like it might, anyways, maybe it is worth discussing.
Yep.
Stephen has his hand. Stephen?
Thanks. 2 questions. One is, as you know, unlike the K-8s have class size guidelines, but BHS doesn't. Is that right? Do you think that I'm sorry, is that not correct, Helen?
I think it's our contract says we will attempt to have classes under 25 where feasible.
Correct. Yep.
And that's for K through 12?
K through 12, pre-K through 12.
That's right. Is that definitely true?
That's in the contract, yes.
Yeah.
And Stephen, I do believe that K to 8 has been clearer about what the ranges are for class sizes from K to 3 or
K to 2. K to
Right,
2
and 3 to 8.
Okay, then I guess I still want to ask this question. Do you recommend this, Hal and Anthony, that we reconsider class size guidelines? Is part of the response to what has happened this semester a reconsideration of guidelines, or do you really see this as entirely a budget and allocation issue? That's question number 1.
I think I'd be hesitant. I would be hesitant to make clear what those class size ranges are. I think we have historically had those, and I will just share them that historically we have strived to have our college prep and standard level classes run from 18 to 22. We are much more, and over time have moved more into the 21, 22, 23. And we have desired to have our honors level classes run from 24 to 26. And this year and in other years, we have outliers on both sides of that. And then I would say AP courses, we desire to have somewhere between 26, but we would certainly go to 28 and not flinch and pull those up to 32. Beyond 32, we would think that those are large, too large, and we have some of those now. And I would be hesitant about limiting it to that, given the sheer number of courses we offer and the outliers that arise.
I don't see why a class size guideline couldn't be a nuanced guideline. I don't see why it couldn't accommodate all of the suggestions you make. I don't think it needs to be a flat guideline. I guess what I'm really asking is, do you think it could be a useful tool for helping prevent situations like these in the future, or do you really see this strictly related to budget? I'm really trying to figure out where the school committee can be useful here.
Adding some more FTEs.
Right. So what I'm asking is what Helen said the only way we could be useful, or is there?
My fear, Steve, is that if you set some type of cap and make it that, yes, we'll all around the table agree that the cap.
No, I'm not proposing a cap. I'm proposing
Suggested
working with you to come up with suggested guidelines that wouldn't hem you in any way, but that would be the rationale for future budgeting, essentially.
I think if they're suggested guidelines, I'm not sure how they differ from current practice. And I think part of what Anthony's describing, right, part of the swing that we get, currently AP Stats is a really good example. I believe we had 70 students request the course. We're currently running 2 sections at 35. That's not ideal by any means.
I
But
think
if you run 3 sections, it takes it down to about 23 students.
I think the change in practice, from my point of view, for adopting a guideline document that has some nuance and that takes recommendations from you, is that it would be also a budget guideline for us in the future. And school committee members, please feel free to tell me that you don't see it this way. I would see it as something that would become one of our budget guidelines, that in keeping with the the class size guidelines that we adopted for BHS, the FTE recommendations would have to hew to that for the school committee's budgeting purposes.
I mean, I think for budgeting purposes, I mean, we have a number like 12 to 15 students means one FTE. And that's maybe how we should think of our guidelines, not particular classes, because they're each so different.
Right.
Okay, I'm happy to abandon this as a proposed tool. I just am feeling around to see if there's something else that we could do that would be useful. I want to ask my other question too, which is, you may or may not know the school committee, when we passed our budget in last spring, did not at all anticipate that this budget would result in BHS having class sizes this high. We didn't expect that you would have to make cuts that would result in an additional 20 classes over 30 students. And we didn't know that this had happened until reports started filtering in the fall. So I guess what I would like to know is, at what point did you realize that this was going to be a problem? And is there a way that in the future, when you realize this could happen, there could be communications that could filter out to the school committee so that we could potentially act? As I was suggesting in the last school committee, I got no support in this one, so it wouldn't be this way, that we could look to see what unfilled positions there were and consider filling those positions with temporary FTE at the high school. But that we could consider some mechanism, some emergency stopgap mechanism for averting a situation like this that has obvious impacts on student learning.
I would say that we certainly knew in sectioning, but in April, when we're doing sectioning, we certainly knew that we were doing it. I would suggest that we did let people know well in advance of that cutting the budget with this rise of kids, and we had said this over several years in this forum, saying that you're giving us budget cuts and we're having a rise in enrollment, it doesn't make sense. And therefore that the implication was going to be that there would be larger class sizes. We definitely said it numerous times about what the impact would be of budget cuts on the school.
I think maybe a distinction too, and I agree that we had multiple communications, and a piece that may not have been fully communicated is the ratio of classes, right? So if we say our honors classes are going to run about 24 to 26, about 70% of our students are in honors classes. And so the quantity of classes, right? If AP and advanced classes are running at 28 plus, 26 plus, about 30% of our students are taking, or not, my math is a little bit off, right? Because we don't offer advanced classes in every area, but how many students are in these classes, I think was underestimated, right? If we say, because our standard and college prep classes, which are running lower, right? 23, 22, 21.
We've gone down to 5 sections.
So we have far fewer sections of those classes, right? So I don't know that that was fully understood when we were communicating those class sizes. But yes, I mean, during sectioning, Anthony, Hal, and I, along with each curriculum coordinator, went through very carefully every single section that was going to be offered and made the hard decisions of what if we would go from 5 AP Chem sections to 4. That allows us to keep college prep chem at a certain level, right? Whether it's for safety or for student support or any number of things. Every single coordinator went through that in every department.
And just, sorry, Natalia, just on that last point about AP Chem, we knew that there would be complaints from parents saying, how did these kids get AP Chem and how did my kid not? Like Ed predicted that, we predicted that, but sorry.
No, I was going to say to Stephen's point, I hear now loud and clear that we are going to be in exactly the same situation, potentially worse, if we have 10 or 12 new students next year, and we have no plan. And unfortunately, I mean, Anthony, I think you're like, I thought it was a bad idea when Helen said defer the physics and math, but if math and science is a big area, like I know it would be heartbreaking for the geometry review and the physics review, but those are 2 FTEs that are really needed. So I feel like some difficult decisions will have to be made. And I don't think it should be our curriculum. Like I think it has to be school committee. I think we need more FTEs and we need to decide whether some of these really important curriculum reviews need to wait, because the parents will be outraged and the teachers will be upset if next year, we could
Yeah,
say we
yeah.
made a mistake this year.
So what
There's no
is-
way we can do it again next
If I
year.
could
Yeah,
interrupt
yeah.
you, which I'm
There's
trying to
no-
do. What is your plan?
I'm sorry, I just need to say in response, like, I also heard loud and clear that if we do nothing on the budget, this will stay as it is. And so we have the information we need going to the budget season, but how? Nothing like this was communicated in a forum like this last year. It's one thing to say, you've been saying this message for years and it hasn't been heard. It's another thing to say specifically that there's going to be an additional 20 classes over 30 students. That was not said to the school committee. Please don't say that it was.
I'm sorry, I don't think, Stephen, I don't think that Hal was saying that that was said to the school
And
committee.
it's hard to interpret his message in another way.
Sorry, I think how I heard it, knowing Hal for a while, was that that was communicated with district leadership as we were engaged in the budgeting process. Hal, you can speak for yourself.
Stephen, I would suggest that we not rehash what happened this year because none of us want it. So I think we need to figure out what is the solution for next year and spend our time on that.
Yeah, I also think that involves understanding communications processes.
Sorry, Stephen, say that one more time.
I think that involves understanding communications processes. I think
Sure.
we're well set up with information to make the budget changes we need to make to support the high school going to the next year so that we don't have this situation again. But I just want to be clear on what information was presented to the school committee. I understand if I have a misunderstanding right now, but I want to clear that up.
We've definitely said to the school committee that you are planning to cut our budget, not last year, but perhaps the year before, and this will have an
Yeah,
impact.
it was last year
In high
to
schools.
this year that saw an increase of 2 to 32 classes over 30.
I think it
That's
just,
when this happened, Hal. It's one thing to say every year, cutting our budget will result in bad results. Of course, that's true. I'm talking about a very specific thing that happened.
but
Hey,
Stephen, I think-
Stephen, let's move forward. I understand what you're saying, but it's not going to be, it's not going to help us.
Helen, you have your opinion, I'll have mine. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm doing a time check. And we do need to end really at 6. I know we'd love to stay longer, but.
Well, this has to come to school, to the full school
Yeah,
committee,
I
obviously.
think
It's
the
serious enough,
conversation-
this warning is serious enough, I think.
I
I think
think
the solution.
we're not, that I don't think has come out here either, that I think is important if we're looking at ourselves as a pre-K through 12 district is and I'm not suggesting we change it, but I'm suggesting that we all have a mutual understanding of the staffing model that we run at the high school, which is an expensive staffing model. You know, and I know that, and I'm not suggesting we change it, but I'm suggesting that the committee has a full understanding of that staffing
And
model.
by that you say that teachers are higher trained, like, that's what I was.
No, it has to,
4 of the core academic departments, sorry, 5, they teach 4 courses in English, 4 courses in social studies, math, world language, and science, and then they have a +1 assignment, which is a staffing structure that means essentially for every 1.0 in those departments, you are yielding 4 classes that plus a tutorial or some other pluses.
I probably need to understand it better, but does that give you any flexibility? Obviously, you'd have to negotiate with things to add a course and pay teachers extra, not a quarter more, but like a small bonus, like if needs, like things like that, nothing, because that's all negotiated. and-
and this is,
so this is not actually, this
This is not
particular
part of it.
advisory was not negotiated. It was just done.
approximately 20 years of past practice.
One,
And I just bring that up
2006,
because we're gonna have many difficult decisions to make if we're expanding here to full day. And we only have so many, so much money.
So where do we go from here tonight? I mean, I think it does have to go to whole school committee.
Or
Ready
maybe,
for that?
or maybe budget and us meet together
Maybe
because this
budget
is
and us
such a,
meeting.
I don't know.
I mean, it needs to be put in context, like Jody's saying. You know, the context of all the district.
And you know, I mean, I have to say, we gave you the budget and you did the best you could with the budget. And it turns out that we didn't always like everything you decided, but you were very thoughtful about it. And so it's on all of us that we try to get this right for next year. Because I think now that we know what happened this year, people have some opinions about whether that's where they would have made the decision. Or how would we be better supportive of the high school administration and the decisions you have to make. You have to make decisions. You don't have a blank check, right?
How many FTEs would it take to correct this?
10? If
Oh,
we
wow,
include the
10.
idea of CTE and.
So that's like $500,000.
No, that's a
more than
million.
it.
That's a million. It's 100,000. I think 100,000. It's probably gone higher than that, but at least 100,000 per teacher. So that's a million.
Somewhere between 1 and 2
Hires.
for the 5 departments. You know, some departments maybe 1, maybe 1.5, 1.7.
And you were
So
talking about
5.
also the additions in art and kids, if they take art, they can't take something else, so.
Correct. There would be some, it wouldn't be a 1-for-1. If it would be kids might decide to take art, they got the art class, therefore they're not gonna take the AP and geo class. There'll be some of that, yes.
Mhm.
I don't think we need the answer right now, but I mean, I think going into the budget season, it would really, if you want to give us your best answer of what number of FTEs would guarantee that this wouldn't happen next year, then we can advocate for it most effectively going into the budget season.
Susan, do you want to have a word or two about this or no?
Yeah, I think there's some ways that we can fortify, the budget to provide some guardrails for this. Typically what you would see is a little bit of capacity built into your budget for reserve, and especially when you're going through kind of these budget reduction processes, there's no way to nail it, right? Scheduling is very dynamic and it includes, student choice and graduation requirements and student needs. And so you can't, as you're planning through the budget cycle, there's no way to be able to clearly identify in the time frame that you're building the budget exactly how the scheduling is going to play out. And so typically what you would do is you would, hold, I always call them extra sections in the budget to help what we would call patching your schedule so that, you're holding in abeyance, your decision making until you actually have real information in front of you.
But we're under
decisions.
now,
So-
and you're asking us to go even over to hold with.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things we could do is incrementally increase the budget, the base of the budget, to build in your regular capacity to be able to make those adjustments. I mean, we'll know a lot more in terms of enrollment in the long run in a couple of months, right? And again, this doesn't line up well with our budgeting schedule, but we'll have 2 other sources of enrollment projections for the next 10 years. We have one. I'm not saying that's the be all and end all, so we have right now. We're going to have a more comprehensive one completed in about mid-February. And then we're also going to have, I guess, a local group of people that have some expertise are also doing one. So we'll have 3 different enrollment projections that we can use to help guide us moving forward. But if all of them are showing an ultimate decline over the course of time, then some of the pressures that we're feeling now, as you felt pressures as you were increasing, will kind of subside a little as your enrollment goes up. So I think there's a lot of data points that we have to do, but there's absolutely ways that we can put some guardrails on in our budget planning process to help navigate.
Not to point out the obvious, but you were not here last year. In fact, we did not have your position filled. So some things were going to fall through the cracks because we didn't have.
And there was an override going on.
There was an override,
And then
right.
the approval didn't happen until May.
I mean, we got
So
through
none
it
of this was
last year, but
Certainty until May, and then we were.
And
still-
then hiring teachers in the summer is not easy,
And I think so.
especially for the AP classes.
Sure.
Do you have empty positions right now? You haven't filled?
Positions? No.
okay, I know
call
there's
us.
a lot
Yes.
to be said still. I guess maybe, we'll talk with Jody and Susan and Hal and Gabe and Anthony, and we'll figure out kind of and you can let me know kind of some next steps, whether we want to do some more work here, whether we want to wait for the budget and it's going to happen include it there, or when do we bring it to the whole school committee? I think one of the message is that we were, disappointed that it happened this way this year, as I think you were too. So.
They don't want to have people.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't want 35 people in the class. We know that. And so, but I guess what we're saying is I'm hearing that we are committed to trying to work this out for next year.
And I think too, with your budget guidelines, which you'll do the second reading, I think this week. Yeah. That's another way that you're signaling to us what the priorities are. And so when we present the budget, that we'll speak to that. These are your priorities and this is, how we've addressed the.
So Stephen, you hear that? We should we look at those priority guidelines.
And budget committee put forward some language there that I think is very supportive of what you're hoping to accomplish here.
Can I say one quick thing, which is just, Stephen, I know how passionate you are and a passionate supporter of the schools. And I hope that you hear from Hal and Gabe and me and all of us not pointing fingers at people as much as saying, we did know there were some issues going into the year. It sounds like there was a gap between what we knew and the school committee needed to know to support us. I think Suzanne rightly pointed to, we didn't have Jody fully in her position yet. We didn't have Susan in her position at all. And I don't think we necessarily had formal communication structures or information sharing structures that were established to send up a flare. And so if a part of that is committing to how do we make sure we're doing that, we will work with our district leaders and with school committee to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate that. I just want to be able to have the school committee mobilize on BHS's behalf if a crisis surfaces in the future where we might be able to reallocate funds on an emergency basis. But I feel like to do that, we have to make sure that there's sufficient communication. And my fear was that we don't understand the communication gap that happened. So I just want to make sure that we're able to communicate successfully in the future so that we can mobilize.
Awesome.
Okay, that's a wrap. That's a wrap.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody, so much.
Thank you.